Hey guys, it's Hyperion here. This video is going to be on a very interesting topic that I feel strongly about. In a recent interview with YouTube content creator Skillup, the infamous Square Enix producer Naoki Yoshida, or otherwise known as Yoshi P, made some interesting comments on the term JRPGs. This interview was done at an event previewing Final Fantasy 16, which is a title that's going to be a big departure from traditional JRPGs. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to his comments, but first, let's take a look at exactly what he said. One thing he wants to get across is that when we create games, we don't go into them thinking we are creating JRPGs. We are just creating RPGs. The term JRPG is used by Western media rather than users in media in Japan. This is going to depend on who you ask, but there was a time when this term first appeared 15 years ago, and for us as developers, the first time we heard it, it was like a discriminatory term, as though we were being made fun of for creating these games. And so for some developers, the term JRPG can be something that will maybe trigger bad feelings because of what it was in the past. It wasn't a compliment to a lot of developers in Japan. We understand that recently, JRPG has better connotations and it's being used as a positive, but we still remember the time when it was used as a negative. Traveling around the world, speaking with fans and media about their image of the franchise, they would always give the same answer, that it's turn-based, that it's anime-like. These teenagers saving the world, very JRPG. This was the image for all Final Fantasy. This was turning off some players because they thought it could only be that, and that there was a reason to not get into it. On top of that, you have a new gen of new gamers who are raised on FPS and games like Grand Theft Auto where input is always direct. For those players, the thought of having to wait before you act is kind of a disconnect for that younger generation. So with our goal to expand the series and broaden the audience, bring back players but also welcome new players, we realized we had to evolve the series and change it up from what people expected. What I want is for players to say wow, that it blew them away. Wow can be perceived in different ways. Wow because of story, wow because of lots of crazy boss battles, wow because whoever made this must have been out of their minds. What we want is for players to have that sense of wow. As for its place within the franchise, hopefully, through Final Fantasy 16, we can kind of regain that sense of the Final Fantasy series is a must-buy. You must check this out. Something that we don't have now, and we can return to the idea that when a Final Fantasy comes out, it's something that we must play. To give a little context on why Yoshi P feels that way on the term JRPGs, let's talk a little bit about gaming history. Back in the PS3/Xbox 360 era, Japanese game companies such as Square Enix were having trouble selling their games in the West because the quality of the games were not as good. This led to very hard financial times for these Japanese game companies since they had a hard time adjusting to new gaming technology. The Western gaming market was dominated by Western AAA franchises like Elder Scrolls, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Dragon Age, Mass Effect, etc. These games outsold Japanese games by a very wide margin, and when Final Fantasy 13 came out, it was not received well by critics. And to add to that, there were two infamous incidents where Western gaming media gave their thoughts on Japanese games. Phil Fish was an indie game developer known for working on the indie game Fez. At an open Q&A session at an indie game conference called GDC, he was asked certain questions by a indie Japanese developer. Phil made a statement that modern Japanese games just suck. A lot of people on Twitter and online gaming media has criticized him and called out his racism. I definitely think this incident was out of line and completely rude and disrespectful. I'm not surprised that Phil Fish is not part of the gaming industry today. This X-Play review of Baten Kaido's origins is completely over the top in how racist it was. Comments like how Japan is in decline is just clearly out of line, even if meant as a joke. Clearly, X-Play had a vendetta against JRPGs, and this review is so bad it can be barely called a review. I'm not surprised that X-Play does not exist anymore, and seriously, good riddance. Here are my general thoughts on the term JRPG and Yoshi P's comments on the term. I feel that the Japanese devs feel that way about the term JRPG are due to several likely misunderstandings. I'll go in depth on what these misunderstandings could be. One possible misunderstanding is that there are several subgenres used in the West to describe RPGs. RPG is a very broad and general term, and a very wide variety of games can fall under the RPG category. These subgenres of RPG can include action RPGs, strategy RPGs, MMORPGs, and CRPGs. To me and most gamers in the West, JRPGs are just another subgenre of RPG. Yoshi P stated that in Japan, JRPGs are simply called RPGs in their country. I'm not as familiar with how things are in the Japanese gaming market, but maybe they don't have subgenres for RPGs like we do in the West. Maybe the Japanese gaming market don't have access to the variety of RPGs like we do, so they're not familiar with games like Elder Scrolls or Dragon Age. Also worth mentioning is that Skillup brought this exact point up in his interview. The reason why these subgenres exist is because if you use the word RPG to describe a game and there is no other information given, no one will know what the game is like. No one will know if the game is like Final Fantasy or Monster Hunter or Dark Souls or like Destiny. That's why we use RPG subgenres in the West. So I don't think of JRPGs as a discriminatory term, and I feel it's similar to terms like Japanese food, Japanese cars, J-pop, or K-pop, which to me are definitely not offensive or discriminatory. Yoshi P mentions that JRPGs had a negative connotation, but to be fair, any genre or subgenre of anything can be used in a negative fashion. For example, a lot of people don't like country music, and haters of country music can use the term country music in negative ways, but that does not mean the term country music itself is always negative. Another point I want to talk about is how Yoshi P thinks that JRPGs are a term used to silo off and mock those games. I feel that the people who used JRPGs as a mocking term are a vocal minority. And people like Phil Fish speak negatively on Japanese games and JRPGs because they have an agenda to push Western games. There are definitely gaming circles, fanboys, and trolls in the Western gaming market who will always bash JRPGs and call them weeb trash. I don't deny that. And these are the Call of Duty bros and the Elder Scrolls and World of Warcraft fanboys. But most Western gamers just want to play a good game. Most of us don't care if the game is from Japan, is a JRPG, has anime art style, anime tropes, or has fan service. If the quality is good, we will play a game and the game will be successful. A good example of this is Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact has done really well in the West due to it being a high quality game with very good localization and marketing. It did not matter that Genshin had an anime art style, anime tropes, Asian themes, or even fan service. Another good example is Square's own Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV was not good at first and sold very poorly in the West, but Yoshi P turned the game around and is now the most played MMO in the West, beating World of Warcraft. Once again, anime art style, Asian themes, and fan service did not matter. And it's a big shame that it seems Yoshi P gets the impression that the majority of people in the West use the term JRPG negatively because of a few idiots who don't even represent the majority of us. Another thing to point out is that Yoshi P mentioned that he first heard the term JRPGs 15 years ago. The term existed long before 15 years ago. It existed even in the Super Nintendo / Genesis era. I remember reading gaming magazines that used the term JRPG to describe the SNES Final Fantasy games. I assumed that when Yoshi P first heard the term, he heard it used in a negative way, likely leading to a misunderstanding that the term was commonly used as a way to mock their games. Yoshi P also stated that turn-based combat is outdated and that action combat is the way to go if you want to have mainstream success. I don't agree with this. It's very rare for a Japanese dev to step up to the plate and make a high-budget turn-based JRPG. The best example of a high-budget turn-based JRPG is Persona 5, and that game came out years ago, and it didn't even have that high of a budget. I would love to see a turn-based JRPG that had the same quality of Tales of Arise or Genshin Impact. In fact, the creators of Genshin, Hoyoverse, is making a turn-based game called Honkai Star Rail. While it's not exactly a JRPG, it's hard to argue that the game has many elements that JRPG games are known to have, like an anime art style. Hoyoverse seems to want to give Honkai Star Rail a big push, so it would be interesting to see how well the game does. If the game does well, it proves that turn-based combat is not dead, and we just want high-quality turn-based games. And in a perfect world, more JRPGs should have the same level of quality as Honkai Star Rail, and that would make JRPGs much more successful in the West. Yoshi P did make a statement before saying that turn-based combat doesn't go well with a game with realistic style graphics. The problem is that it is very, very rarely tried before. So if barely anybody ever tries, how does anyone know if turn-based combat and realistic style graphics can work together? There is Yakuza Like a Dragon, and I feel that game executes turn-based combat with realistic graphics well. As much as I myself love JRPGs, there are a lot of things JRPGs can improve on to be more successful in the West. One thing is to eliminate random battles. Random battles are just annoying and unnecessary, and I was not too pleased to find them in even a recent JRPG like Octopath Traveler. Enemies should be shown on screen, and you should always have the option to go up to them to engage in combat. Another thing JRPGs can improve on is having better overall production value. I love the art style and art direction of JRPGs, but the actual graphics and textures could use a lot of work. Also, combat animations and effects could be a lot better. I think a good example of a recent JRPG with good production value is Tales of Arise. Tales of Arise was a big jump in graphics compared to the previous Tales of game, and this is due to the game using Unreal Engine rather than a proprietary Japanese game engine. I wish more JRPGs would follow this. This would give the graphics of their game the same quality as other AAA games. Another part of the overall part of the production value is better localization. The localization is a big part of how JRPGs are not having as much success as they could have in the West. Games like Tales of Arise and Genshin had really good localization, and as a result, both games were very successful in the West. Another big issue holding back JRPGs is marketing. Japanese game companies just need to market their JRPG games in the West a lot better. Genshin had a very good marketing campaign, and this did wonders for the game's success in the West. Despite my takes on Yoshi P's statements on JRPGs, I feel that Final Fantasy XVI is taking the series in a very interesting direction. I can respect that Square wants to make a different game and wants a game that sells as well as Western AAA games. The Final Fantasy series, even though it invented the JRPG genre, it was always an experimental series. Each mainline entry in the series was very different than the previous entry. There's no other JRPG series where a mainline entry was a MMO. Square Enix has made many JRPGs throughout the years, and are still making traditional turn-based JRPGs to this day, like Octopath Traveler. If they want to make something different, I am open to that idea, and will wait and see if they can execute it. I don't think that there's any shortage of turn-based JRPGs in the market, and gamers who want a more traditional turn-based JRPG can look into the Persona series or the Trails of series. As a big fan and content creator on JRPGs, it's depressing to hear that the Japanese devs feel negative emotions when they think of the term JRPGs. Once again, I feel it's an overreaction due to misunderstandings and generalizations. I feel that these Japanese devs that feel that way are jumping to conclusions based off a few negative articles, statements, and videos from people who don't even represent the majority of Western gamers. I hope that these devs can look past the negativity and see that there is a big market for their games in the West. There are definitely examples of Eastern games succeeding in the West, and I hope to keep seeing more examples soon. In fact, I think the demand for high quality Eastern games have never been higher, as gamers are getting tired of the quality of Western AAA games. Once again, Western gamers just want to play a good quality game, and we can play and enjoy games even if they are JRPGs, even if they have an anime art style, anime tropes, or fan service. I can understand that Square Enix want to make a different game than what they're used to, but I disagree with the thought that they absolutely need to make games that are super westernized to be successful. For me, I don't discriminate against games. I prefer Japanese games because they tend to have the gameplay I'm looking for. But if a Western game comes along and it's high quality and it seems good gameplay wise, I'll check out the game. I just want to play good games, and I feel most Western gamers feel the same way. If you like this video, please click on the like and subscribe button. It helps out my channel, and it helps me put out more content such as this video. My name is Haitrain, I'm signing out, and I'll see you next time.